What is up, Insaners, and welcome to the Game Week 10 team selection, guys. We are back with another video. This time, we're not doing the regular team selection video that we generally do. We're trying to do something different. We're trying to make our team, we're trying to tackle with our issues live with all of you guys. So, how are you guys doing, first of all? I hope you've been having a good time. You've been having a good week. We are very, very close to the deadline. So, I hope that your transfers are made, or at least you've thought about what you want to do and what kind of moves you want to make, what are the different strategies or different directions you can, or you want to take your team forward. So at least have that much clarity in mind. We'll be going through a lot in this particular stream. This is not going to be like a regular deadline stream. Of course, we'll be taking up questions, we'll be taking up whatever comments, suggestions, and all of that great stuff that you guys generally provide during our streams. But again, this is not replacing the stream. We'll also be doing a deadline stream tomorrow. So for you who were asking, there were a lot of questions on DMs, specifically on Instagram, whether this is the deadline stream or not. But so we'll be doing the deadline stream as well, and this is just in addition to what initial thoughts, some early thoughts that we have in our mind, which we've not been able to kind of make through a video. We'll be covering all of that stuff here, and we'll see how we go. We'll see what we can do through the stream in terms of what kind of value add we can give, so that we can also make this like a regular feature in some capacity, right? So we'll be going through that. We'll also be doing some live tinkering. I think that's going to be really interesting, because we will at least have an idea. In fact, I also would have some sort of an idea in terms of what kind of moves I want to make for my team, and I'm sure a lot of you would be also having similar thoughts, similar strategies, so we can all go through all of that great stuff together, right? So hi all of you again. Hi Akla. Hi Krunal. I hope you guys are doing fine. So we'll just start talking about our team, start talking about what is our thought process, and then we'll kind of get into questions. We'll also do some tinkering, so that you guys are kind of in the mix as well, and also a part of the action, right? So in general, I think there are a lot of question marks in terms of our team this particular week. We'll start with defense, we'll then move on to midfield, and then we'll kind of talk about our forwards. So in general, there are some issues with our team this particular week. In goal, I think it's not an issue, but I think it's a very good question to pose. And I think a lot of you were also asking me this question, whether to, play Ramsdale this week or whether to just go for Foster, because I think a lot of people have Raya in their team, and now who's injured for a long time. So a lot of managers are also looking for a goalkeeper transfer. So that's going to be really interesting, because a lot of people were on Ramsdale initially. Then I think the wave kind of shifted towards Sanchez. I think it's been on and off Sanchez. A lot of people thought that Arsenal was doing well. I was in fact one of them as well, who thought that Arsenal will be doing well this particular stretch of games, and we could get some clean sheet points. But again, I'm not really panicking, because Arsenal has had like a couple of games where Ramsdale has made decent saves. Again, they were a bit unlucky in terms of conceding a few goals, especially against the Villa team. I think that goal was it was unstoppable, right? You couldn't have really saved that. But in general, I think Ramsdale is a decent option to go for. We're not doing any changes. There's a good case to be made for Foster for this particular week, but I think we might not do it. I've seen a lot of teams, a lot of managers who are playing Foster in their team for this particular week, because I think Southampton won't be having Broya, so I think he's definitely missing this game. It'll be Che Adams and Adam Armstrong, playing up top. So again, there could be a case made whether they're really good, or in terms of attack, whether they can really score against the lower block teams, or the weaker teams of sorts, right? So there could be a case made for Foster, but I think we are not going ahead with Foster. We will be going ahead with Ramsdale. So I think the in goal issue is kind of sorted. Now coming to the defense in general, we have Trent, Azpilicueta, Cancelo, Livramento. This particular week we are playing Livramento. Most probably we are not really benching him, because I've seen again a lot of managers, a lot of players benching him, then regretting, why did they bench Livramento for a particular week when he's doing really well, right? I think against a Watford team who's not really that great in terms of defending, I think it's still a good shout. There's good attacking potential in the Livramento pick, so I think he definitely stays. Now there are a couple of flags here as well. We have one flag in particular. We have Azpilicueta, but I think Azpilicueta looks fine. He was seen in training, so he should be okay. There's a good case to be made for Azpilicueta. I think a lot of people are also, thinking of a sideways switch. We'll kind of also cover that in the tinkering section. So I was also thinking of whether to, play Aspilicueta in this week or not, because he might be injured, he might not be fit, but he was seen in training. I think he's taken part in a couple of training sessions now, and I think it should be okay. It should not be that tricky with Aspilicueta, because James also played midweek, right? So I think irrespective of whether James is starting or not, I think Aspilicueta really starts this game. I don't think so. I think when we talk about the three centre backs, right, there's a good case to be made for Aspilicueta. I think Rudiger also starts, and the third defender is a bit tricky. You could have Silva, who was, who was, I think was rested for the midweek game. You could also have Christensen, who's back in training as well. But I genuinely feel that the third spot would be Aspilicueta. In case if James doesn't start, right? In case if James doesn't start, I think Aspilicueta could also play right wing back, right? So going by that logic, I still feel Aspilicueta is a lot safer than somebody like a Reece James. And I know a lot of people are really stressing about Reece James and what he can do this week, whether he can come off the last 15-20 minutes, or maybe even the last 5 minutes, or even the last minute, and give them a single point. I think that's going to be a little tricky. But in general, I personally feel James is going to start this one. I think that's the strongest lineup that Chelsea have, with James on the right side and Chilwell on the left side. I think Chilwell is slightly safer. So in case if you're looking to go for a Chelsea defender, I think you should definitely look at Chilwell, especially if you have a bench, right? If you have players like Livramento, if you have players like maybe like a Duffy, for example, or a certain player who generally plays for their respective team, I think in that case Chilwell is a good player to have, right? Now coming to the other defenders, I won't really talk about Trent a lot, because I think it's a good pick. Again, a good matchup. Brighton is going to be a little tricky. It might not be that straightforward. It might not be a 4-5 nil sort of a game, but the way Man City opened up Brighton in the first half, right? I think there's good merit in having Trent in your team. And of course, a lot of people are taking hits. A lot of people are, some people were benching Trent as well. I don't know where those kind of crazy ideas came from, but I think in general Trent is a good pick, and you should definitely have him in your team in case, again, if you don't have the likes of double up with Man City defenders or Chelsea defenders, where you could still kind of make up. But in general, I think Trent is a good pick. The last pick is Cancelo. I think we've heard a lot about Zinchenko, rumors about Zinchenko coming in, Cancelo maybe getting a rest. Last week was, expected that he would get that rest. But I think in general, with Zinchenko coming in and slightly, transitioning into the team now, there could be a chance that Cancelo is rested. But again, with Cancelo, we always had that doubt, right? And it will always happen. Let's say if he's in the current season, I think if he's playing, let's say the next 10 odd games, he might be the next 10 City games, right? He might be benched for maybe one, maybe even 2 games, right? So that's the risk that we kind of generally take. But I think Cancelo is also a good pick to have. If you have Diaz also, I think Diaz is also pretty much nailed, I think, in that setup. It's either between Laporte and Stones where the rotation could happen, right? I know I'm saying this, and Diaz was also benched for one of the games. But in general, I think there's a good chance that Diaz and Cancelo start as a combination, right? Uh, so in general, I think not really worried about my defense. I also have Semedo in case if something happens. I don't think so. Anything is going to happen from now till the deadline. But in general, if something happens, I think I also have Semedo in my team to just kind of be there as a backup. I also have Saka, who would be starting, and I also have Gallagher. In worst case scenario, if everything goes south, I also have a player. Again, he's playing Man City, so he's definitely not going to get anything. Mostly, he's not going to get anything. Again, it's FPL, so we don't know, but I think we generally have it covered. Now, coming to the midfield, I think this is where a lot of challenges coming this particular week. There are a couple of I won't really call them red marks, because Rafinha and Buemo are generally not out for the game week. Whatever the managers have spoken in their press comments and the conferences, I think it's all been very positive from a Rafinha and a Buemo owner per se, right? There's a good chance that Rafinha starts this one. Buemo also could start this one. There's also a chance that these two, both of them, play for the next 60 odd minutes, for the first 60, 70 minutes, and they probably are substituted, or vice versa, where they generally come on to the last 15, 20 minutes. I think we'll talk about Rafinha first, because Rafinha is facing Norwich. Norwich is a great game to target from an attacking perspective. So whosoever is playing Norwich, you generally target those attackers. We've seen what happened with Chelsea last week, right? So I think there's generally not a lot of merit in transferring out Rafinha unless you're really revamping your team with, let's say, a couple of transfers, and you're going for some really differential moves and trying to gain rank and all that stuff. But I think in general, having Rafinha still makes a lot more sense because at the end of the day, it's Norwich, right? And I know it's Leeds. They've not been playing that well. They're definitely nowhere close to what Leeds were last season. But in general, Rafinha is their standout player. If Leeds are going to do something from an attacking perspective, I think Rafinha is going to get involved. And I personally think, I really think that he's fine for this game. And we've seen these kind of cryptic messages from Bielsa as well. Initially, in the earlier press conferences as well. I know he's been very straight and very direct in some press conferences, but in general, we've seen these kind of messages where, maybe Rafinha will play, maybe he won't play. More often than not, we've seen that Rafinha generally plays, apart from that 1 week where, he returned late. And there was also a lot of speculation around that time as well, right? So I think in general, I would want to have Rafinha for this game. With Buemo, it's a bit different because, again, I'm not saying that you should transfer out Buemo because he's an injury risk. He might not play this week. Absolutely not, because the games that Brentford are having in the next few weeks, I think those are really good fixtures to target. I think they're playing the three worst defenses out of the worst four, right? I think in the next 3 or 4 games, something like that. So I think that really calls for players like Buemo, players like Ivan Toney, for example, and we'll talk about him when we're talking about our transfers and our forwards. So I think there's a good case to be made for Buemo as well. We could play him in our team this week. Again, there's a slight risk in terms of what kind of transfers we make. This formation and the Buemo pick could change, and we'll cover that as well. But I think if you have Buemo, if you have any other transfers to make and you want to bench Buemo, if you already have a player like Ivan Toney, for example, then maybe that's also a decent move. With Buemo, it could be a chance that he might come off for the last 20-30 minutes, and that could be less points. For example, Burnley still have been very average, very bad in fact defensively. So I think you could still have him in your team, and I think if I'm not making any transfers, if this is the team that I generally have at the end of it, it could change still. But if this is the team that I have, I think Boemo would definitely stay. Salah, again, I'm not really covering too much because we know how he's doing. We know he's Salah. We know probably he's the best player in the world right now in terms of form and in terms of the way he's playing. He's my captain for this week as well, so I don't think so. There's a lot to discuss in terms of captaincy. Of course, we'll talk about differential captains also at some point during this video. But I think in general, you play safe, you go with the crowd. I think there are different ways to kind of differentiate your team and not probably doing it with Salah, because a lot of people did that last week and they really suffered for it, right? A lot of people had Havertz as their captain. Maybe some people had Son as their captain, or maybe even Antonio, Jimenez, and all these differential options. With Salah in the form that he's in right now, with the way he battered Manchester United all alone, right? I think there's a good chance that he can do something similar with Brighton as well. I know Brighton is still a tighter team. It's a tighter defense than Man United for sure at the moment. But I still feel, Salah captaincy, just stay there, differentiate your team in some other way. Vardy, I think, has been, again, he's not been declared. I think you'll call it a declaration of fitness, because Brendan Rodgers said that Vardy is fine. So I think in a way, Vardy should be okay for this particular game. I think, his record against Arsenal is pretty good. So in case if you've made a transfer where you've switched out Vardy already, then that's absolutely fine as well. You could always make a case with the likes of Jamie Vardy that he might not be that much value. He's 10 million odd, right? So he might not give you that much value as compared to somebody like Ivan Toney, for example, or a Broja, for example, if he was fit, right? So in general, I think Vardy should be okay. Jimenez, Antonio, not huge fans of both picks at this week. I still feel they're okay picks because Everton is a weak defense. I don't think so. The way Everton played against Watford, I think it was very encouraging for teams who are playing the Everton defense now. I think Benitez has a big job on his hands. Antonio, with the form that he's shown generally and the way he's played, I think he could easily score against Villa, so that is also fine. So not really worried in terms of my overall squad. I think in general, again, there's not a lot to kind of change, and I can easily roll a transfer in this particular team because, again, there's not a lot that needs attention, right? Of course, you can have one pointers from the likes of Buemo and Rafinha. That's the risk that we generally take. But I have a deep squad. I have a deep enough squad to, make sure that if anyone gets benched, if anyone doesn't start, someone can come from the bench, right? So the first option is generally not to make any transfer. I think if you have a similar team And if you're planning to make a couple of moves down the line, you could easily roll a transfer. You could save that transfer and not have any movement in this particular week. Now the other option is in general you just try to attack the, again, depending on your strategy, depending on how or what kind of manager you are, you take that call, you take that strategy, and you play with that going forward. So you can also kind of attack this week. I know there's a lot of talk about Foden, about Mount, about the likes of Havertz and etc. These kind of picks where now I think the template in a few weeks would be a lot of people divesting their funds, taking out money from their attack, and then kind of shifting those funds towards midfield, because now you see the likes of Foden, now you see the likes of Mason Mount suddenly exploding in the FPL scene, and now a lot of people are actually going for these picks, right? So, and if you have forwards who are about 8.5 million, about 7.5 million, of course you have some money invested in those forwards. You also could be having 4.5 million, maybe 6 million odd midfielders, which you might want to upgrade, right? So I think that is the general route, that's the general direction that people are taking. I think we also have something similar in mind. So I think we'll kind of cover the tinkering part just in a little bit. We'll just first take off some comments, and then we'll kind of show you what kind of transfer moves we have in mind, and then what are the different directions that you could also go with your particular team, right? So in terms of injured players, I think this is pretty much about it. I don't think so anyone has a really big doubt in terms of not starting this week. I think Aspilicueta definitely starts this week. I think Vardy is also a starter this week. Rafinha Buemo, I think Rafinha definitely starts, and if you have him, you should probably keep him. You might not get him in your team for this week, or you might not get him at all, because Leeds generally have a tougher run of fixtures. So Rafinha is still okay as a pick if you have him. If you don't really have any other transfers to make, then maybe it's a different thing. But you generally hold him, and you don't take him out of your team. Uh, Shreyash, I don't think so. He was declared not fit by the Brentford manager. I think I think the Brentford manager said that he might. So he didn't say that he's definitely out. He said that he might be okay, and they'll basically see before the game in terms of what kind of fitness they have, and what kind of fitness players like Pinnock. I think Pinnock was also yellow marked in the game. So I think what kind of fitness these players have, and then post that they'll probably start them, right? So again, there's a good chance that they probably come for especially Buemo, right? Buemo looks like a little doubt. He probably comes for the last 20-30 minutes. So I think if you have better players to start, if you have a City defender or a Chelsea defender, an additional City or a Chelsea defender, if you have somebody like a Saga, for example, those could also be decent options that you start. Buemo could be benched. Yeah, there could be a case that you can bench Buemo, but I think Rafinha definitely starts this one. Mount is the most transferred in player. FPL is all about last game week performance. I think a lot of times what happens, people generally try to make these knee-jerk reactions, knee-jerk moves where people are reacting to the last game week. Let's say if a player really performs well, and I think these are mostly casual players in terms of the way they play FPL. I think if you are a serious enough player, even if you are not a casual, right? If you still take some sort of, if you watch some content, if you follow some data, if you've been following football, etc., I think then it's slightly different, because you would see the game, you would see what kind of players are attacking, what kind of players are keeping clean sheets, who is scoring, who is assisting, who's creating chances, because it's just not about goals and assists all the time, right? With players like Ivan Toney, with players like Jamie Vardy, they generally are on the other side of the spectrum, right? Ivan Toney is underperforming his numbers by a great deal, right? Similarly, Jamie Vardy is overperforming his XG numbers and his expected goal numbers by probably about 2 or 3 goals, right? So you generally, and again, Son is also one example. So I think in general, you of course you follow stats, you follow what people are generally doing, you see what kind of moves people are making, and then you take your own decisions. I think Mount is still not a bad pick, to be very honest. Mount is still a decent option to go for, especially when you're thinking about short term picks, short term options, because I still feel Lukaku and Werner could be out for a few weeks, maybe a couple of weeks, if not more. And I think for those 2 to 3 weeks, especially with the fixtures that Chelsea has right now, I think those could be really good games as well, right? So, and I think Mount, of course, generally Mount has not been that sort of a player who's exploded the FPL scene, who's scoring 2 or 3 goals most of the matches, who's probably performing like someone like a Salah. Of course, probably not the right comparison here, but in general, he's more of an assister than a goal scorer. We've seen he ticks along very nicely with those 6, 7, 8 pointers week on week. He's done that last season as well. So I think he's that kind of player who would generally give you those steady returns instead of going for this exploding suddenly and having this 24 point or whatever that number was. I think those many points. I generally feel Mount is not gonna get those kind of returns week on week. But yeah, fair play to people who are transferring him in. I think he's still a decent punt. He's a decent option to make or to go for, especially if it's very very short term. Shubham, you brought in Trent and Kane for Lukaku and Aspi this week for a -4. Yeah, I think Kane is still a little risky because I understand Lukaku because Lukaku has not been playing and he might still be out for a couple of weeks. Whether you take out Aspi, again, Aspi I think plays this one for sure. But yeah, there would always be a doubt in terms of Aspilicueta getting minutes, getting starts, because generally there are options in that centre back role. James could also see rotation with Aspi. So with Aspi, I think it's okay if you are especially getting Trent, who's gonna play majority minutes unless he's of course injured. So I think Trent is a good move. Kane, I'm still not very convinced with that fact. For a hit, maybe tricky because again, if the same move was for Son, I would have probably been a little more comfortable, a little more confident. But I think with Kane, the way he's playing, his body language looks a little off. Of course, he's shown certain moments of brilliance with the Tottenham team. But in general, I think I'm not really impressed with what Kane has done so far. So I think going by that logic, going by whatever I've seen and the kind of spaces that they're talking about Kane, it's a tricky one. I probably go with Son because the numbers are pretty much similar, right? The way they are performing, the way they're attacking numbers in terms of chances created, in terms of shots in the box, in terms of goal attempts. All these numbers are very similar, and I'll probably, especially when the captaincy decision is not there, right? Because more often than not, you're probably going to captain Salah because if you don't, you'll start losing points, even if you have Salah. I think that's a very, very important point to kind of note. So I think when captaincy is not there, it's captaincy is not involved. I think it's still an okay move to not go for somebody like a Kane. Of course, if you've got Kane, you back your decision and you see for a couple of weeks if the Kane move is not working out, then you kind of see what can happen because the fixtures are gonna get better, right? So if you've got Kane, absolutely fair play, and you should see it out for the next 3-4 game weeks at least, right? Especially when the easier fixtures kind of start, and if you see that those are also not working out, that is probably the time you take that immediate call and you transfer out Kane. Turbo, your team is Mendy, Regulon, Cresswell, White, who could be a doubt. Son, Salah, Sar, Benrahma, Gray, Jimenez, Iheanacho. I think there are a few moves. There are a couple of players I'm not very very confident of. I like the midfield. Gray, Benrahma, Sar, they're tricky ones to be honest. I really like the Iheanacho punt. I think he's definitely become the creator of the Leicester City team. I think he's gonna get more minutes. I think with the switch in formation, with the change in formation, I think Iheanacho is gonna get more minutes. He's definitely gonna create more chances for somebody like a Vardy, for example. Maybe even someone like a Harvey Barnes or Madison, or even Tielemans, right? Because Tielemans also in decent scoring form. I think there are a couple of players that I probably won't have. I would probably not have Benrahma going forward. I'll also kind of think of Gray because I think Buemo looks like a better option. Sar for this week could be okay, but in general, I think Sar, I'm not really impressed with what Sar has done in the past few weeks. So I'll probably change Sar. If you have a wild card by any chance, I think there's a good chance that you can use it this week as well, because I think there are certain players that I probably won't have in my original team. Let's say I won't have a Mendy, for example. I'll probably go with a cheaper keeper. I'll probably won't have Regulon because again, Spurs defense has not been that great. They're not really keeping clean sheets. Regulon is okay in terms of his numbers, but again, nothing spectacular. You have better defenders to go for in and around that price range as well. So I think yeah, it's a decent team, but I would still want a couple of changes, if not more. Ojas, you're saying you have Buemo, Rafinha, Tierney, all doubtful. I've used all transfers. Should I take a hit? I think, again, if you can bench Tierney, I think Tierney is a little long term. Buemo could still play. I think you definitely play Rafinha in your team. And if you have, I don't know who your third, substitute is. If that is a playing player who plays 90 minutes, or who's still a regular starter, or whosoever, even if it's getting you a couple of points or maybe even a clean sheet, right? You generally play that player. In case if you again, depends on what kind of players you're thinking of getting a hit for. So in case if you get taking a hit for somebody like a Son or somebody like a Foden, for example, I think those could still be okay in the long run because they're long term picks, right? So totally depends on what kind of hit, or what kind of players you want to target with that particular hit. If it's a very short term move, if it's for a week or two, then I think you don't take the hit. You just play with whatever players you have, because this player that you're getting in, if you take him out the next week or the week after, and that player's not really performed well, your hit won't really make a difference. It might even drop you in ranks and in points, where you might not be able to cover those points that you've taken that hit for, right? So I think, going by that logic, totally depends on what kind of players you're getting in, but I think it's still okay. I think you can still have these players playing, because Buemo long term, even Rafinha long term could still be an okay pick. It's not the worst player to have in your team. Rafinha doubtful. I think he plays this one. Not Don't think he gets benched, or he doesn't feature at all. I think he starts. What do you think, Ole? Since you are a United fan, should be kept or sacked? I think he definitely should be sacked. I think the time's up for Ole. I don't think so. Giving him a couple of games is really going to change anything. We'll probably talk about this a little more in our deadline stream tomorrow, but we'll try to keep it very very focused towards the transfers for this particular game week. Uh, some good differentials for this game week. I think that's an interesting question. I think we'll also look at some players that we can have, and I think we can also get into the tinkering. This is a good way of kind of getting into the tinkering section as well. So we'll just let me just set this up. I hope you can see the screen. I think yeah, it should be visible. So in general, I think, and if it's not, guys, just let me know in the comments. Just please do let me know in the comments if you can't see the screen. But I think in general, if you want to target differentials, if you are looking for a differential pick, I think there are certain options to go for. I definitely think, you know, uh, a lot of people are talking about Man City players. A lot of people are talking about Phil Foden as well, and I think we'll also kind of cover him here. But I think if you want to target, a differential player, I think there's a good shout in terms of having Bernardo Silva as well. I know that not a lot of people have really spoken about Bernardo Silva in their team. I don't think so. A lot of people are focusing on Bernardo Silva, considering that you have the likes of Grealish, considering that you have the likes of Gabriel Jesus. I know a lot of people have also gone for Kevin De Bruyne as well, and Phil Foden has been the main points magnet for the team, right? So I think going by that logic, you could also get somebody like a Phil Foden. Like a Bernardo Silva, sorry, because I think, see, his ownership is only 5.7%, right? So it's not much. I think it's a decent punt to have. He's been decent. He's never really a highly rated, attacking asset from Man City. He always gets these smaller assists, or smaller point hauls, which is probably like a 4 pointer, maybe a 6 pointer. He never really explodes in the FPL from an FPL perspective. But I think this season he's done well. He's got 2 assists, 2 goals. He's had a couple of double-digit hauls here as well. So I think that could be a decent option to go for, especially if you are looking. Of course, most of the people would be going for somebody like a Phil Foden, for example, right? So if you want to differentiate, Bernardo Silva could be a great pick to have. I think generally you try to target players from Man City, Chelsea, or even Liverpool, for example, right? I think if you can afford a second premium as well, I know that that would require some sort of shifting in your midfield, but I think. I know Mane was definitely benched for one game, but Mane could also be a great differential, because I think not a lot of people are going for somebody like a Sadio Mane, right? Because of the price that he's at, because of it's difficult to get Sadio Mane in your team, especially when you have the likes of Salah and even Trent, for example, right? So he could also be a decent punt. I think when you're looking for, again, totally depends on what kind of budget and what kind of players you're looking at. In case if you also are looking at a defender, right? So you could also go for somebody from the Brentford team. I think the Brentford team has some decent options in defense as well, right? So you have the likes of Henry, I think, who's a great player. Rico Henry, he could be a great differential. See, he's only 1.3% owned, and I think his price is also pretty decent, right? So if you and this is especially for me as well, because I'm also trying to downgrade somebody like a Semedo, because I don't really like Semedo in my team. So in general, if you are looking to have a fourth cheaper defender, let's say if you have a couple of City defenders, you have Trent, maybe you have a couple of Chelsea defenders, for example. I think the fourth defender could be key, where he plays, and the Brentford team has decent fixtures, right? So if you see their fixtures, I think they have Burnley, Norwich, Newcastle, Everton, Tottenham, Leeds. So I think, and Watford as well. So I think the next 6, 7 fixtures are pretty good from a clean sheet perspective. Brentford generally have done really well, from a defensive point of view. So I think that could be a good shout. And I think so yeah, so he could be a decent option as well. If you are looking at a Wolves player, for example, you rather than, again, I don't think so Wang is a differential anymore, but in case if you are have money invested in Jimenez, or you're looking for a cheaper attacker, right? I think Wang could also be a decent option. I think you could also go for somebody like Adam Armstrong as well, because I think Broja is injured for at least this week, if not more. And I think, with Adam Armstrong, yeah, 2.5% ownership, that's not really a lot. That's a good differential to have. I think he starts this one for sure. So I think he could also be a great differential. In general, I think there are some players, there are some cheaper alternates that you can, generally go for. A lot of these premium players have high ownership, so there won't be general differentials. So yeah, these are some options that you can look at from your team perspective. I also have a couple of options, but again, they're not very differential. The likes of Gallagher, the likes of Saka, they're not very highly owned in terms of the top 10k, 20k, that sort of a rank range, right? So I think those could be decent options as well. Um, Apart from that, I think we'll take up a few more, and then we'll probably just talk about our transfers and finish this. So, do you need Chilwell if I have Rudiger? Again, it's a good thing to have, but I don't think so. It's a must have. Of course, if you have Rudiger, you're pretty safe in terms of the start, in terms of what you can do with the Chelsea defense. I think he's gonna get you those clean sheet points. Don't expect him to really, give you attacking returns. Yes, he scored a goal. I think in general he won't be giving you attacking returns. I think if you have Rudiger, and of course if you have a luxury transfer to make, then Chilwell is definitely good. I would probably not take a hit to get someone like a Chilwell in my team this particular week, because you already have Rudiger who plays. I think Chilwell starts this one. Yes, there will be some element of risk involved with the Chilwell pick, in terms of, again, similar to what Cancelo could be, right? The next 4 or 5 games, Chilwell could be benched for one game. So that's the risk that you take. So if you have a luxury transfer to make, if you have nothing else to do, then probably Chilwell is a good pick. But only having Rudiger is also absolutely fine, especially when you have the likes of Trent, when you have somebody from the Man City team as well. I think then a double up on with Chilwell might be okay not to have, right? As I said, it's a good to have. It's probably not a must to have. Conte won't be a good option. Yeah, we'll talk about that. You have Rafinha, Ojas, Buemo, and Gallagher as budget options. Yeah, I also don't like Gallagher, to be very honest, from a long term perspective. Let's see some midfielders or something in that sort of a price range which we can get. I also don't like Gallagher a lot. Of course, you have Gray, but Everton doesn't really give me a lot of confidence. Yes, in the short run they have Tottenham, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal. Those are tricky games. I think in general, you could now upgrade these sort of players, these sort of picks, and probably get somebody like a Son. Son is, of course, could be difficult to get for your team as well. But again, you could target somebody like a Mount. You could target somebody like a Phil Foden, for example. I think Smith Rowe is also a good option. I think Smith Rowe, a lot of people are not really having Smith Rowe in their teams. He's just around 10% owned. A lot of people have Saka, and I know Saka has been dodging returns. He's been dodging, attacking returns, but he could still be a good option. I think Smith Rowe is a good cheap downgrade to Saka. Again, both of them are currently showing similar numbers, similar attacking returns, and we saw that last game Saka I think was playing on the right, whereas Smith Rowe was playing on the left side, so he was not really playing as a number 10, which I think a lot of people expected him to play. So I think that could be an interesting combination with Saka on one side and Smith Rowe on the other side. And Smith Rowe looks like he's a better, finisher in off the football as compared to Saka. So I think Smith Rowe could also be a good cheap option. I think he could still be a decent, fifth midfielder to have if you don't like Gallagher long term, because I also don't like Gallagher in the long run, right? So he could be a decent option to have. Of course, You have somebody like a Bernardo Silva who's not in the same price bracket but could also still be an option. You still have Buemo in that price range as well. So I think there are options which you could go for in that cheaper category. But if you can upgrade this cheaper category and probably move towards Mount or Foden, I think that could also be a very intelligent and a very smart play. So you want someone around the 7 million budget, but other than Mount and Jota. As I said, Bernardo Silva could be a decent option to go for. Let's see what we can get in the 7 million price range. I think I would have probably gone for somebody like a Zaha as well, but I think Zaha right now is having difficulties in getting into that Crystal Palace side, right? Because of the play, because of how Edward and Benteke have played. I think it's a little tricky for Zaha in that price bracket. In general, Torres, of course, he's injured. Lingard is not an option. Rafinha, if you already have Rafinha, otherwise Rafinha could still be okay. He's again not the worst player to have right now. I'll probably won't have Benrahma. Sorry, not Eric Bailey, Leon Bailey. Sorry, my bad. Leon Bailey could also be a decent option. Villa again have a decent attack. I think he is fine. He is fit. And West Ham, Southampton, Brighton, Crystal Palace, Man City, Leicester. Not the best fixtures, but I think he's still a decent punt to have. If you want, you could also punt on a Tottenham player. I know most of the people won't be punting on a Tottenham player, but again, if you want, you can also punt on somebody like a Lucas Moura as well, right? Who I think looks like a nail starter in that Spurs lineup. But again, it's Spurs at the end of the day. You don't really know what will they do, right? I'm not really generally impressed by how Spurs have played. Zaha could be an option, Ojis, but again, whether he's gonna, get 90 minutes or how is that fitment gonna be there, right? Because Eze is also back in training. I think Eze is also gonna be featured or will be featuring in that lineup in some capacity. And I think now, Zaha is no more he's no more a standout option, or he's no more the showman of Crystal Palace, right? You have Edouard who's doing really well. You have Benteke who's also been playing well in the new Vieira setup. Then you have the likes of Gallagher as well, who could still, he's generally been the assister to the assist, right? So in general, I think there are options. There are other options that you could probably go for. If you don't have Smith Rowe, I think Smith Rowe is a good option. You also save some money with that price. I think in general, you also have Saka. Again, if you're not very confident in terms of how Smith Rowe is going to do, I think Saka is also a great option. I'll probably not look at Gray and the other Everton options. I think there are better options, as I said, in this price category. I'll again uh, generally, if people are looking to get Gallagher, I'll probably tell them not to get Gallagher because he doesn't look like a great option. Um, yeah, so I think there are options in this price range, but I think for me personally, and I think this is what I want to kind of tinker with in terms of transfers, that I generally feel that probably going with somebody who is a little more explosive in midfield could be the play now, because I think there's a good chance that we might be shifting the template here, right? So I personally, right now, again, I have a free transfer. I have 1.3 million in the bank, as you can see here, and I don't really have to make a transfer. I can just play the team as is. But I think there's good merit, in probably taking out someone like a Saka, for example. And let's say if I go for somebody like a Foden, right? And I've kind of thought this through, so I'll take you through my thinking here as well. So in general, let's say if I go with somebody like a Foden, I know that I will be probably taking a bit of a risk with Phil Foden. I think in general, Foden could miss an odd game or two. There could be a chance that there will be some Pep roulette played, some sort of rotation played. I know he's probably also a template pick, but because a lot of people are going with somebody like a Phil Foden, but I think he's generally been very good. I think in terms of returns, he's that kind of a player who will give you explosive returns, right? And I think he's a long-term pick. He's a part of this project that Pep is kind of now, moving towards, especially when he has to focus on the Champions League. He has to win the Champions League, right? Because he's still not done it. So I think in general, Foden, the way he's played, because of his versatility, because of in what kind of positions that he can play, I think he is still a lot more nailed than somebody like a KDB, for example, right now, because KDB generally has not been that fit. He's got these niggles. He's also getting older, right? I know we don't really consider that when we talk about KDB, because he's still pretty young, but I think he's generally struggled, to maintain fitness, and I think that could be the case this season. He could play the Champions League games a lot more than featuring in the league. And I think Phil Foden, he can play on the left. He can also play as a number 9. He can also play as a false 9. He can also play. in the center of the pitch as well. So I think there's good chance that you get a lot of versatility with Foden. So I think you get in Foden. Now with Foden, I have zero point 0.7 million to make, and I think that could easily be made with one of Antonio and Jimenez. I think the current form that Antonio is in, I'll probably just keep him in my team, and I'll probably just take out Jimenez, and I'll get someone like Ivan Toney, for example, right? So I think I really like Ivan Toney for the price that he's at. I think 6.6 million for a forward player who's on penalties, who's the he's the main player of that Brentford team, right? So I think going by that, and plus he's gonna play teams like Burnley, Norwich, Newcastle, Everton, Tottenham, Leeds, Watford, Man United, Southampton. I think fixtures till game week 19 look pretty good, right? Uh, we know that how they've played against the stronger teams where Tony's generally dropped in a lot deeper, and you could easily make a case that he's not really gotten goals, he's not really gotten assists, he's been unlucky with a few shots that he's taken, he's been unlucky in terms of underperforming his expected goals. He could have easily scored two or three more goals than his current tally, right? But the way and if you guys have seen the midweek fixture against Stoke City, generally how they were playing, I think Brentford were dominating the ball, they were dominating possession, they were taking a lot many shots. I think Tony was not dropping that deeper, right? And that could be the case with these smaller, weaker teams as well. We know that Burnley, Norwich, Newcastle, especially, they don't have a great defense, right? So in these kind of matches, he might not drop as deep. The system won't be very different, to be very honest. The system would be a lot similar. But I think in general, there's a good case to be made for Ivan Toney for these games and a long-term move as well. So I think with this transfer, I have zero point 0.2 million in the bank. Considering that there are no price drops or price rises for these players that I've taken out or I've gotten, and I take a -4 again. I know it's a hit, but I think it's a decent hit to go for because both Foden and Tony are long-term picks. I think if you don't have these players, I still feel, I know that I'm also jumping on the Foden train, and I've seen a lot of people also talking about Foden, how he could explode in the coming weeks. But I genuinely feel that he could be again, I don't know whether he's gonna score a goal every game or not, right? But in terms of starts, I know it's a very risky game that we are playing, but I think in terms of starts, he could still be a lot more nailed in the coming weeks. With whatever Champions League games are coming up, with whatever cup games are coming up, I still feel Foden starts majority games in the Premier League, and I think with that certainty, he could really explode. We know that the top three teams, or the best three teams in terms of attack right now, are Man City, Chelsea, and Liverpool, right? Liverpool being the top team. So there's a good case to be made there. Brentford also have done pretty well. They have a good run of fixtures. So I think this is definitely one move that I'm planning to make. Now specifically with this move, next week, right? Game week 11, I have a decent team for game week 11. I don't really need to make any changes. Of course, I can make Aspilicueta. I can probably change Aspilicueta and get someone like a Chilwell, for example. I know it's a sideways move, and I'll probably it's again it's a luxury move, to be very honest, right? If there's a certainty that Aspilicueta plays in that Chelsea team, I'm pretty confident that he at least gets a clean sheet, if not that attacking return. If he plays on the right wing, in that right wing back position, I think there's a good chance that he gets that attacking return, right? So that's a luxury move that I make. Now in general, I can make this move and then I can play on from there. I can have a different set of transfers in game week 12. But game week 12 also is a time where the Spurs assets are having really good fixtures, right? So in that particular week, I can easily make another case of probably taking out Gallagher, who's probably been okay so far. He's, at least since the time I have got him in my team, he's not been giving me any points. So I can probably take out Gallagher, and I can target someone like a Son, who could be a great option. I know that there's a huge price difference, and you'll probably have to take out some money here. So I can get in Son, who has a great run of fixtures from game week 12. If you can see Leeds, Burnley, Brentford, Norwich, Brighton, Leicester, Liverpool, that's tricky. Then Palace, Southampton, Watford. I think it's a great run till at least game week 22. Even Arsenal fixture from an attacking perspective could be okay. So from game week 12 to game week 22, I think of getting a Spurs attacker should be a priority. And in general, I think Son is providing better value at that price range, and I think he could be a great option. So I get Son. Now, of course, if I have to downgrade somebody, it can't be Antonio, because I'll probably not have enough money for a third striker. So we take out Jamie Vardy, and then we probably go for somebody cheaper, who, let's say somebody like a Wang, for example. I know Wang is, not a lot of people are convinced with Wang. Of course, he's providing better value than Jimenez. he's been scoring goals, and Jimenez has generally been the creator in the Wolves team. So let's say we go with somebody like a Wang who's only 5.7, and he's got a decent haul so far. Now with this we have zero point 0.7 in the bank right now. This zero point 0.7 again could be utilized next week in probably game week 13 as well, where we then focus on different set of players. Because if we see Wang here, right, in game week, let's say we make this transfer, of course we do not make any moves in game week 11, we make this transfer in game week 12. West Ham defensively have been poor, they've not been that great. So there's a good chance that somebody like a Wang can score against the West Ham team, because Wolves also are a team who take a lot of shots, right? So there could be a chance that Wang could get something. I know that he's been a great finisher. He's not taking a lot of shots, but his finishing has been great, and I think that could, again, a player might or might not be able to sustain that. So there's a good argument to be made there. But then if you see the next two games, I think Norwich and Burnley are pretty good fixtures to have. Norwich is somebody that I would generally target from a fixture perspective, right? And even Burnley, from a defensive point of view, haven't been that great. So that gives me a 2 week buffer in terms of having this player, having Wang, and then I can kind of start thinking in terms of what I want to do next, right? Because there's a good chance that I can also play a 3-5-2, benching Wang for the tougher games. So Wang has Liverpool, Man City, Brighton, Chelsea. That's a tricky run, right? And then you have Arsenal and Man United as well. So probably not from 19, 20, 21. Watford, Arsenal, Man United are still okay. But I think in general, that's a tricky run from 15 to at least 18. And I might just bench him and I play a 3-5-2, right? Where I play Antonio. I know it's a cheaper forward line, but I generally don't see a lot of value in getting or going for these very high priced attackers right now, right? So if you generally see the statistics, not a lot of, at least in the top 30 odd players, there are only 4 or 5 attackers in terms of points. So that easily shows that there are a lot of points to be won in defense, in midfield, and I think that trend is going to continue till the time we get somebody who's a sustained striker, somebody like an Antonio who's probably doing it for a longer time, somebody even like a Vardy, for example, right? Who With Vardy it's a bit tricky because now Daka is also playing really well. They have Iheanacho as well. There's Harvey Barnes, there's Perez as well. So there are a lot of different combinations that Brendan Rodgers can try, and there's a good chance that Vardy also gets limited minutes. Still, it feels like a difficult possibility right now, but I still feel that that's an option, or that could happen, right? So in general, I think this is my thinking in terms of the next 3 or 4 weeks. I know I could also probably not go for Foden. I could just have Saka, and I could probably try to get Son for this particular spot. So that could also be an option. Uh, in general, I could also, let's say in that particular, in game week 11, where I was talking about changing Aspilicueta to Chilwell, I could also do Semedo to probably, I can downgrade Semedo to probably a Brentford defender, because I would probably want to have three really good defenders who are pretty much nailed, who are probably playing for a premium defense and who are also attacking in nature, right? So, and then I have somebody like a Livramento who's I think who's going to play for majority games, because see, Watford, Villa, Norwich, I think they're great games to have somebody like a Livramento playing in your team, not as a substitute, but actually playing in your team, and that could be really good. So in general, this is what I have in mind. Stephen, you're saying that you're rolling your transfer this week. We have Trent, James, Livramento, Rafinha, Salah, who's obviously the captain, Havertz, Sarr, Vardy, Antonio, Jimenez. You have a bench of Buemo, Tierney, and Duffy. Yeah, Havertz captain would have definitely hurt. Yeah, I think that was still a good call. I won't say that was a bad call, but I think nobody expected Salah to just blast off Man United the way he did. Of course, we were expecting him to do still well against a weaker Man United defense, but I think the way he played was absolutely stunning, and I think that would have definitely hurt. Um, so you saying that, what do you think is the best 5.5 to 6 million midfielder to replace Sar with from next week? I think Buemo is definitely the option to go for. He has to be the standout 5.5 6 million bracket player. I think he's definitely not out for a longer time. I think the fixtures are really good. He's been playing pretty well. I think he's been unlucky not to get the amount of goals that he can actually get, right? Because of the way generally Brentford have played. They've played in favor of how Buemo could be on the pitch, could feature in the game, could impact the game. I think it's really helped Buemo and Brentford, but I think that trend might still change a little bit. Having said that, the fixtures are really good, right? So the fixtures are good, and I think in general, you target him. In case now you're saying that you already have him, right? Then it gets a bit tricky because of course I would probably not want to get Gallagher. I would probably try to take a hit maybe, or try to make some downgrades. If not a hit, let's say if you're saving a transfer this particular week, you save that transfer, you have that. Let's say if you have some additional money, you take that money, you try to downgrade somebody from your attack or your defense, right? Because I feel that there is better value in, the 7 to 7.5 8 million bracket, where you are now getting a few options who could be really good options, right? uh, in that 5.5 to 6 million bracket, I generally don't see, it's a very tricky bracket, to be very honest, because yes, we had the likes of Townsend, we had Kovacic has been decent, but I think he's also out now. Dokore is a big miss. I think Dokore was a great option. Smith Rowe, I think, would be still the standout option if you really can't do, that shifting of funds, and probably those couple of transfers. I think Smith Rowe probably would be the standout pick. Again, the fixtures are going to be a little tricky for Arsenal, so keep that in mind. But I think in general, if you are looking at a cheaper fifth midfielder within that price category, I think Smith Rowe would be slightly on the cheaper side, but I think he still could be a decent option to have for the playable games. I'm sure you're not going to play Smith Rowe against the very tough oppositions like the Man Cities, like the Chelseas, and the trickier games. But I think Smith Rowe would be the standout pick in that price bracket. So you're saying you would love to upgrade him, but you're pretty set on switching Havertz and Antonio to and Kane. Havertz and Antonio to Kane and a 4.5. Not very sure, yeah. Like having Havertz again. Yeah, if you have had Havertz, of course you would at least have him for the next couple of weeks to see what kind of returns he can get, because you just didn't have Havertz for that one game week, right? Where you captained him, where he didn't return, where you had him in your team, you probably took a hit for it as well, and he just didn't score. So in general, I think you would keep Havertz. Switching to Kane is again something that I would probably, as you're saying that you'll also probably do it from game week 12. So you have a couple of weeks to see if Kane is not really doing anything, and if the whole Tottenham team is kind of carried on by Son, which has been the case so far. I'll probably not do the Kane move. I'll probably do the Son move, and I'll probably try to, then do the shifting in terms of my attack. So I think, of course, there are different ways to think and different ways to go about it. Again, at the end of the day, there's no single way of playing the FPL game, right? Somebody might be playing a very different differential game, captaining Salah and probably having differential players and doing really well still, right? So that's also an absolutely fine way to play the game. So in general, I think there could be a lot of directions that you can go for. I still feel if you want to jump the gun, or if you want to be a little ahead of the curve, I think there's a good way of doing that by making subtle upgrades, going for somebody like a Son a little earlier than a lot of people would be. I think those couple of game weeks could be really well. I think if you can afford a Son this particular week as well, I think that was also a great transfer to make, because Man United, the way they're playing defensively, I think there are goals in that game. Might not come from Kane, or Kane even might be involved, but I think definitely Son is going to be involved, right? So I think Son could still be a good option to go for. A lot of people have asked me whether to go for Foden or Mount. I think in general, Mount is a short-term pick till the time Werner and Lukaku don't return. I think it's still a decent option to go for. If you have Havertz, please stick to Havertz. I think you didn't get Havertz for just one single game week. Please don't take hits to remove Havertz. He's still going to play number 9 for Chelsea. Not every game week is going to be a 7-0 from Chelsea. Even against Newcastle, I don't think so it's going to be that crazy. And I think Newcastle still has the ability to score as well in that game, right? So in general, I think you stick to Havertz, you bought him for a reason, you stick to your gut and you play him for a couple of weeks, and then you kind of transfer him out if he's not performing well, right? So of course there are other ways to think in terms of FPL, in terms of the coming weeks as well. You could have Jamie Vardy, you could easily downgrade somebody like a Jimenez to a Wang, maybe even to Armstrong. Broja, I think, is injured now, so he's not an option. You could downgrade Jimenez and Antonio to somebody like an Ivan Toney as well, which I'm also kind of thinking of doing. So I think in general, in case if you can save a transfer, of course if you have a luxury transfer, try to get a City defender. In case if you can save a transfer, you save that transfer and you probably start preparing yourself for Son, or even again, Man United is a bit tricky right now, but probably from game week 14, United could also be an option, right? I know not a lot of people are talking about United right now, but at least in terms of attack, I think it still could be okay. You could still get somebody like a Greenwood or maybe even a Rashford, for example, considering that he's fit, but probably around the game week 14 mark, right? So I think in general, if you can make a luxury transfer, you go for a Chelsea defender. You can save as well. You can have a couple of transfers for next week as well. I think the priority should be to get at least Tony or at least one of Buemo and Tony. I know not a lot of people would be getting Buemo this week because he's carrying an injury flag, but you definitely target a double up. I personally think that a double up is going to be very powerful. I know not a lot of people would be going for that double up, so you could also differentiate your team, especially when you have Salah captain, right? You don't differentiate there, but you then differentiate with these different combinations of players that you can get, right? So I think it generally is a good way of playing differential now, not with captaincy and with your set of picks, and you could really get ahead of the curve by making these moves a couple of weeks in advance. Something that I also did with my wildcard. I think my wildcard team was pretty good. And I think that was the week where we got to a rank of about 5,000, right, in the world. And that game week itself was pretty good. I think it was a low scoring game week. We scored about 64, 65 points, but the average was only 40, right? So we gained heavily there because we kind of thought ahead of the curve. We went on the wildcard a little earlier, and we took advantage of those picks there. Yeah, Son is definitely a better pick. Kane allows you to move to a Ronaldo easily when they're yeah, that's what I'm saying. You again, that's also one way of looking at it. And thank you for bringing it up, Stephen. Uh, you generally can also look at that, but I generally feel that players like Rashford, players like Greenwood probably could be better value. I know Ronaldo would be doing a lot of scoring, but at that price, especially when you're not captaining him, maybe for those weeks, maybe you're still captaining Salah because of how things are going in FPL. Because if you don't captain Salah, you lose points on him, and you would not want to lose points on Salah, right? Because you have him in your team. Of course, you would want to take advantage of that. So having a 12 million odd player who's probably scoring a goal, who's probably not captained most weeks, there might be just better value elsewhere, right? Because I know the fixture swing is there. I know United have not been playing well, and that could easily change. But I personally don't think a major change is suddenly going to happen. I think it's going to be very difficult for Ole to kind of come back from what's been happening, right? So, but yeah, let's see. Let's see. I think let's give it a couple of weeks, and we'll kind of have a better idea in terms of what's happening there. We'll take a couple of more questions, guys. In case if you have anything, please do point that in the comment in the chats. If you've not liked the stream, if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. That will be really, really awesome. That'll really help us grow the channel as well. We'll take up a couple of more questions in case if you have anything. In terms of captaincy, I think I'll touch upon the captaincy also a little bit. I don't think so. There's a lot of merit in talking about captaincy because if you have Salah, you captain him. I know it's probably not the best move. It's not Salah against Brighton could be tricky, but the Salah that we are seeing right now, again, the form that he's in right now, that could also be a great move at the end of the day, right? And in general, I think the effective ownership, which is again the combined ownership of Salah, of managers who have Salah, who are also plus who are also captaining him, triple captaining him in their teams, that ownership is definitely going to be more than 150. And if it's more than 200, you generally start losing the points anyways, right? And we've seen that with certain players. We've seen that with Salah as well. So I think in general, if you don't want to captain Salah, there's please be prepared that there could be a huge risk that you take, and you even if Salah doesn't return heavy, right? Even if he probably just gives an assist or scores a goal and nothing, and doesn't really do anything else, right? You could still end up losing points. So I think that's a very important call to make. In case if you still want to go differential, I think Phil Foden against Palace is also a great option. I think Vardy against Arsenal is also a good option. His record against Arsenal is really good. I think Arsenal still has the tendency to concede a couple of goals. If you've got Mount or if you've got Havertz, I know a lot of people won't be captaining Havertz now after what happened last week, but I still feel having the likes of Mount and Havertz it's still a good option. You could also captain a Chelsea defender, right? I know it sounds crazy that you're captaining a defender, but you could easily go for somebody like a Chilwell who's done really well. Who could go for a Trent as well. Trent is a lot riskier, I think, than Chilwell because Chilwell is facing Newcastle. So Newcastle still have a great chance of scoring and getting something from that game. But I think these are still decent differential captain options to go for. Uh, you're thinking of getting rid of Antonio so you can fund Foden. I think it's not the worst move, to be very honest. I don't think so. Foden is essential by any means. Uh, yeah, I don't think so. He's essential, but he's definitely a good pick to have, considering that you're getting an asset probably in the Man City team who's gonna feature in majority weeks. I know we said that for Grealish as well, and that's not really turned out the way. But I think the versatility that Foden has, right? He could play in a number of positions. We know that he can really get explosive returns. He can get those 10 pointers, 15 pointers, even 20 pointer, for example, right? That won't be really very surprising if Foden gets something like that. So I think he's not essential, but going forward, I think with the template changing, with the kind of players that, with the kind of midfield options that are changing, right? Because at least from the very beginning till now, we've only seen, the cheaper options playing really well, giving a lot of value. But now I think the likes of Foden, the likes of Mount, maybe even Havertz, I still don't discount him completely, to be very honest. I think these options can really stand out. Son has already been doing really well. So the template could change, and you could go for these more expensive and slightly more expensive players, and let go of these cheaper options. But yeah, I don't think so it's essential. But getting rid of Antonio, so that you can fund Foden, I don't think so it's a bad move, to be very honest. I'll be very honest. I think it's still a decent pick to go for. Of course, with Antonio, you are taking out a player who's been in decent form, but the fixtures are tricky, right? So you could easily make a case for not having Antonio in your team as well. The ownership is high, so in case if he does well, in case if Antonio scores a couple of goals, then you're going to lose out a lot of points. But again, that's the variance that you go for. That's the change that you can, you that's the risk that you basically go for, right? So I think I generally feel Antonio could haul this week, but with the fixtures getting tricky, I think, yeah, you could easily make a case for not having Antonio in your team. And I think there are certain managers who are going without Antonio, and that's absolutely fine. But I think, yeah, in terms of Foden, of course, he's a midfielder, so he's going to get one additional point for that goal scored. He's also going to get one additional point for a clean sheet as well, right? So I think there's good merit in having Foden in your team, absolutely. Great. I think so, guys. We'll end up there. I think hopefully I was able to get some thoughts, get some clarity myself as well in terms of what we are thinking in terms of our team. I think we'll of course have that deadline stream as well. So in case if if you have any more questions, in case if you have certain questions which were not answered for this particular video, make sure that you tune into our deadline stream as well. I think it's going to be really awesome. It's let's hope it's not very very chaotic. Let's hope we get some news on some lineup and some leaked information about players, etc., and all that good stuff as well, right? Great. So thank you so much for joining, guys. I think we'll end up here, and we'll definitely see you tomorrow.